Greetings, everyone. It's a beautiful day here. Hope it's a beautiful day in your neck of the woods. The sun is shining. I'm watching the birds out there. I love spring. Now, you know from my previous videos that I am very passionate about growing my orchids in water culture. And I do grow some of my orchids in Leca. And I did a video the other day on that. And I have had a lot of response on how to grow plants in Leca. So the first thing I want to tell you is I have been pronouncing that word incorrectly in my videos. I have been pronouncing it Leca, and it's actually Leca. It's pronounced Leca. So as I said before, if you come here for proper pronunciation, you might as well just go on somewhere else because you're not going to get it here. But I'll try. So Leca. All right, with that being said, I wanted to show you a couple things in this video today. I have been growing my orchids in water culture for about 2 years. And about 6 months ago, I started a Leca journey. And I have noticed that a lot of people are growing their houseplants in Leca, and that interests me. So I'm going to take the journey myself. And I thought maybe you guys join me on this journey. Now, I have started a couple of my houseplants in Leca. In other words, I've taken a start from one of my mother plants, and I have put it immediately in Leca until it started, and then I will continue to grow it in Leca. I have found through researching this that if you're a beginner, that's the easiest way to do it. Don't transfer all your plants to Leca. Maybe find a cheap plant on clearance, or take a start off one of your mother plants and put it in Leca, just as you would if you were planting or starting it in water or throwing it back into the dirt, but instead you're putting it in Leca. So let me use this little pothos as an example. I started her probably 5 months ago from a mama plant. And I just immediately threw her in Leca, and I have kept the water to about there until I get to see some good root action. Now today I haven't disturbed her except for making sure that her water is kept to about there until she gets good starts, just like you would if you were starting her in water. But today I wanted to have you join me in taking her out of this Leca and actually checking the roots. So let's see how she's been doing. So I just pour out the Leca and I check her roots, basically. All right, she's got some roots. Look at that, she's growing. So, but you know what? Those roots aren't really, if I was to plant her in dirt, I would still wait to plant her in dirt because I want those roots to be a little bit more stronger. Yeah, they're good, but I want them to be a little more stronger. So with that being said, I'm going to just go ahead and I'm going to stick her right back in the Leca. And I'm going to cover those roots with the Leca. And I'm going to pound her down a little bit so that the Leca gets good around those roots. And then I give her some water. I'll fill her back up with water, just like I would if I was growing her as a start in water. And then I'll just leave her, and I'll keep that water level till about there. Okay. Here is one that I have started, again from a mother plant, and I have thrown her in Leca. And as you can tell through the Leca, she has got some really nice root action going on. So that's going to lead me into my next segue. Different water levels for different stages of your plant's life, I guess I call it. As I stated before, since I planted her in Leca as a start, and she didn't have any roots, I kept that water level up, just as I would if she was being propagated in water. But this one, however, I did the same thing too. But she has got really good roots. I can see them. I don't even have to take her out. They're reaching down, see? They're all the way down. So with this one now, she's got a little bit more water in her right now because I just watered her. But this one, I would keep that water level right about there. It's right about to the rim of that glass. So just that tip, same thing with an orchid, how you have just the tips in water. It's the same thing with plants in Leca. You just want that tip down there. Okay. And then you wait until that dries up. Let that dry up, and then you add more water just to there. You don't want to fill it all the way up. You just want it to there. The Leca is going to allow the plant and roots to get air, and it's also going to grow down towards the water. Now, growing your house plants is in Leca is the same thing as growing your orchid in water culture, meaning you're going to probably lose leaves. You're probably going to lose roots, but it's okay. They grow back. Roots will grow, I promise. So, in fact, I had in my other video that little Chinese evergreen. I started him from a mama and put him in Leca. And he was big and beautiful, had a lot of leaves. He was a beautiful start. But he whined and fussed and kicked around, and he's down to maybe 3 leaves. But he has taken and he's grown a new leaf. So just be patient. Growing in Leca from transferring your plant from soil to Leca takes just as much time and patience as an orchid. All right, so with that being said, here's another one. And this is a spider plant. And he has been in Leca for probably 2 months. And if you can see, he's got some really good roots. So I don't leave that water, to about there. I'll wait till this water evaporates before I water him again. All right, so with that being said, I do fertilize my houseplants in Leca. I fertilize my houseplants in dirt. I don't fertilize my orchids in water culture, but I do fertilize my plants. And with growing houseplants in Leca, it's extremely important that you do. So I am going to go into detail a little bit about the 2 things that are very important if you're growing a plant in Leca. And the one most important thing is your pH. So you need your pH to be balanced. You can't just throw your water in there and hope for the best. It really does need to be balanced. Now, it's kind of funny that I'm saying this because about, 5 months ago, my husband told me that. You really need to balance your pH because I was just growing, houseplants in my orchids in water and my houseplants in dirt. He said, you really need to balance your pH. I'm like, thanks, blah, blah, blah. But he did it for me one time. And he balanced my water for me. And I used it for about a month. I started pHing it for about a month. And you know what? I hate to admit he was right, but he was right. Balance your pH. It's extra important to balance your pH if you're growing in Leca. So let me show you how I balance my pH. It's really kind of simple. What I do is I purchased one of these pH balance meters. They're about $14, somewhere around there. This isn't God's gospel. You can get whatever pH meter you're familiar or comfortable with. Some people just get the solution, which kind of reminds me when you pH your fish tank water. In other words, you put the solution in a little vial and then you add your water and you shake it up. And then you compare it to a pH chart to tell you whether you need to up your pH or down your pH. But I find that I like this. I like, my husband picked it out, and of course he's right about the pH stuff. So I like the little pH meter. So what you do with your pH meter is you get some water, and I'm just going to use my water that I'm watering my plants with right now. And you're going to, first of all, take the little cap off. You're going to turn it on. Now, house plants like their pH to be between 5.5 and 6.5. So if you can get your pH between those numbers, you're good to go. And what you do is you turn your pH meter on, and then you stick it in there for about 5 seconds. And you're going to let it read. And right now it's reading 5.5. So I'm good to go. My pH is 5.5. Well, it's going down a little bit because it's out of the water. But if it would, depending on whether I want to lower my pH or make my pH higher, then you go over here to these things. And you have to purchase these things. A pH up and a pH down. So depending on what that meter just read, like I said, you want your house plants to be, and your orchids to be between 5.5 and 6.5. So if you can get your water between there, depending on what that meter read. In other words, if that meter was reading 4.8, I know that my pH needs to come up. So when you do your pH and you want to balance it, only do one drop at a time. Do a drop, stir it up, take your meter, test it, do it, and depending on what it says, do another drop, stir it up, test it, and you see what I'm saying? Now let's say that my pH balance right now, when I just tested it, said 7.8 or something like that. That tells me that my pH needs to come down, and that's when you use this. Again, do it a drop at a time until you can become familiar with kind of where your water, because like I keep my water in a 5-gallon bucket. So I know that one of these droppers, it usually takes a pH down, and it's about a dropper and a half of one of these to balance it, because I know I've done it a couple times and it's the same every time. So like I said, depending on what your meter is telling you, that's going to tell you whether you need to use the pH up or the pH down. It really is pretty simple, but like I said, I like the meter versus the little, put it in the thing and compare it to a chart. But hey, you do what you do you. If that works for you, you do it. Then I just kind of shake it off a little bit and I replace that cap. All right, let's talk a little bit about fertilizer. As I said, I don't fertilize my orchids in water culture, but I do fertilize my houseplants. I fertilize in the summer. I don't fertilize all year round. But if you're growing a house plant, if you're growing a house plant in Leca, you do have to fertilize year round because they're not in soil. They're not getting any of the soil nutrients. Now, some people who grow in Leca or do hydroponics, they have this fertilizer that comes in 3 separate bottles, and it's meant for the 3 separate stages of the life. In other words, if you were just having a little start, you would use this fertilizer. If it was a mature plant, you would use this fertilizer. If it was a plant that's in bloom flowering, you would use this fertilizer. I don't mess with all that because it's whatever. What I use is this Dynagrow. And this Dynagrow is made specifically for hydroponics, but it's also good if you're growing in dirt. It's just a good houseplant fertilizer. And it's organic. Now, I've told you that before in a couple times in my videos. Buy organic fertilizer. Plunk the money down. Buy the organic. Because that Miracle Grow, Job's, Orchid Food, whatever, it's synthetic. It's like taking synthetic vitamins. Get good vitamins, get good fertilizer. And what I do, like I said, I use the Dynagrow. I mix it up in my 5-gallon bucket. I water them every time I water. However, unless I get a burr up my butt, I use the Super Thrive. Sometimes I use the Super Thrive. Like I said, it depends on my mood. Super Thrive, again, is an organic. All it is fish emulsion with other nutrients added to it. It smells like butt, as I said in my other videos. It really does. It stinks. You get it on your hands. If you don't wash your hands, you're going to walk around all day going, where have my fingers been? But the Super Thrive is another one that I really like to use for my houseplants, be it in dirt or Leca. So there you go. Super Thrive, Dynagrow. So let's get started. I wanted to show you today how I transplant a houseplant from dirt to Leca. Because I told you before in another video, I'm really apprehensive about doing this because I have not ever done it and I just never done it. I've always just used starts, but this time I'm going to make the plunge because I lied. I have done it once and it was successful. So this makes me want to do it again. And let me show you the one I did do. This is a Calathea prayer plant, Calathea. And I transferred her from dirt over to Leca. And she's doing really good. I mean, it's been 2 weeks. She didn't put the proverbial fit that my Chinese orchid did, or my Chinese evergreen. She kind of went, yeah, I like it. All right, cool. Notice that I don't keep her water. Of course, I do. I mean, has just been watered, but I usually, it is a little bit more, but I usually only water to about there, and I do use fertilized water. But there she is. She's a success so far. 2 weeks success. And like I said, that made me want to carry on with my houseplant Leca journey. So let's start with that. Now I got this begonia at the nursery yesterday. And I have already taken her dirt off. And basically when you're transplanting a houseplant to Leca, it's the same thing as when you're transplanting an orchid to Leca. In other words, you have to get all that stuff off their roots, the dirt, whatever's in there. And it's kind of hard to do, more so with a houseplant than it is for an orchid, because as you can tell, these roots are very delicate. Now, some people soak this plant when it's in dirt. They soak it so that dirt gets to be muddy. They say it's easier to work with, but I have found that it works better if it's dry and I take the dirt out or off the roots. But you do you. Like I said, if it works better being all wet, then do it. But I like to do it dry. And I have done that already. I've taken all that dirt off her roots. Now, when you transfer to Leca from dirt, it's like I said, it's as important to a houseplant as it is an orchid to make sure you get all that stuff off the roots. Now, what I have found helps me with that is, again, I take her under the water and I give her a good rinse. Because you don't want any of that dirt in your Leca. Just like you don't want it in your water when you're doing an orchid by water culture. And there's this clump in there that's just dirt. And I'm not being able to get it out without like ripping her up. And I don't want to do that. And I don't want to use my toothbrush like I would on an orchid root, because like I said, these roots are pretty delicate. So what some people do when they get down to this is they put their plant in water and they let it soak for, a couple hours. And then they go back and they put it under the water and they keep rinsing off that dirt. But let's just say, for the sake of this video, that I've done all that and she is pristine. She's got great, clean, beautiful roots. So my next choice would be, what type of container am I going to put her in? Now you notice that the plants that I just showed you were in vases. They don't have any holes. There's no holes there. She's just with the water. There's a vase, Leca, and water. Some people like to use for their hydroponic houseplants is the nursery pots with the big holes in the bottom. Most of the time when you bring a plant home from the nursery, it has one of these pots. So if you want to do, like I said, if you want to grow your house plants in Leca, keep these pots because you're going to need them. Okay, with that being said, they use these pots or they use the vases. Sometimes they use the other kind of nursery pot, the little black ones, just as long as they have lots of those holes. Some people use these kind of pots that have this kind of hole. This one came with my orchid. Yeah, this looks familiar. What your orchid sometimes comes in with this kind of pot. Keep that kind of pot. Now, I don't have one to show you, but some people have pots. And you can do this. It's your preference. I might at a later date. Some people have they're like the orchid pots with the slits in them. But they're not only orchid pots, they're also pots specifically made for hydroponic. You want to grow slits in there, not only so your Leca can get water, but also a little bit more air. I have not done that with any of my pots. I've been okay so far, cross your fingers. But I might come back at a later date if I notice that they're just not getting the water. Whatever, for whatever reason, you might either buy those kind of pots or just put slits in your pots. You know what I mean? Just little slits. All right, and you always, when you use these kind of pots, you're always going to want to have a catch pot, a pot without any drainage. And the plant has to be able to get down to the bottom of that pot. It has to fit into the bottom of your pot. So if you notice with this pot, it has little things in there that prevent that from happening. So with this type of pot, I am going to have to use the same kind of pot that my orchid came in to begin with. I'm going to have to use this kind of pot because that one fits down in there. Well, it really doesn't. So I might not use these pots at all. What I probably will end up doing with her is I'm going to use this pot right here. And then I'll put her in another catch pot, what you call a catch pot. And I have another one right here, no drainage. I'm going to use that. So I can put my pot right in there and put the water in the bottom, which you'll see in a minute. Okay, let me move on real quick. Like I said, let's pretend that this plant has no dirt on it at all. It's pristine, it's beautiful. What I do is I put my Leca in the bottom of my pot. I put my plant in there, and I fill it just like you would with dirt. You fill it up all the way around with some Leca. Pound it down in there, so you make sure that not only the plant is stable, but the roots, that the Leca balls are down there around the roots really well. Okay, so there she is. She's done been repotted into Leca. Now, with my catch pot, what I do with it? There it is. Holy cow, I'm losing my brain. All right, so I'm going to throw her in my catch pot. But before I do, I want to water her. And I'm going to use my, usually when I repot my plant from soil to Leca, or when I do a start, I don't use the Dynagrow right away. I'll use the Super Thrive. It's a little gentler on them. So, but this is some Super Thrive water. And when I water her, now or forever, I'm going to make sure that I water her from the top and I get those Leca balls. Just kind of move her around so the Leca balls get kind of moist too. Okay. Good. And I put the water in my catch pot to about there. Can you see that? It's not all the way up to, it's probably to about there. And then I just leave her in there. See that? There you go. There you go. Then I'm going to place her in her nice little home. I'm going to tell her, welcome to the fam. And that's all you do. Okay, but there is another important step to growing your houseplants in Leca. And that brings me to why some people choose the vase over the ones with the holes. And that's because when you're growing your houseplants in Leca, not your orchids, not even your orchids in Leca, unless you're fertilized. But I don't fertilize, so I don't worry about it. But if you fertilize your orchids, it applies to your orchids as well. If you're growing your oh my word, if you're growing your orchids in Leca, you need to do this step as well. Okay, when you're growing a plant in Leca, you need to flush the Leca. You need to flush the Leca monthly. Like I said, I don't worry about it with my orchids because I don't fertilize. But plants that you use fertilizer in, you have to flush the Leca at least once a month. Okay? And when you flush the Leca from your plant, you have to take it underneath the faucet and fill it up with water. I kind of let the water drain out a little bit. Okay? Fill it up with water and then you drain it back out. And that leads me to why some people choose this pot over a vase. Because see how I have to hold my plant to drain the water? Whereas if she was in one of these pots, all I would have to do is just throw it underwater, swish it around, just, you know, probably about that long, and then throw it back in the catch pot. So that is why some people choose the vases and some people choose this. I like to use the vases for my starts because I can see the root action just a little bit better than if it was in one of these in a catch pot. But if I'm going to transplant one of my house plants from dirt to Leca, then I'll go ahead and use one of those kind of pots. So that is all I got as far as Leca. I hope that this was helpful, and happy growing. Stay safe, stay well, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.